No? Eh?
Great. I'm a little bit concerned a lot of people didn't laugh. That you guys didn't get it. You don't get it, maybe this class is a little bit, more advanced. But first, actually, to be honest, I didn't get it, but it was really funny. The way that we deal with conflict with relationships, especially even in marriage or in dating life. Today's topic is very important. What's the title of it? Yeah, conflict resolution. A lot of relationships, promising relationships, would break up because of conflict, because of not knowing how to deal with conflict. And as even a priest, I would risk some of the, in relationship-wise, there are things that can be done, but we wait until the end of, to when we reach that level of that could be solvable. And we've seen a lot of relationships being broken off with, but I think conflict resolution is a very essential topic in dealing with a relationship. Just to recap a little bit, first we started of understanding the spiritual definition of dating. And then after that, while we understand the dating principle or definition and pursuing dating, not to be hindered by the outside look, right? The second week. Third week, it's our purpose. So why are we dating? We try to see the purpose. And for the week, what was the fourth week? Anybody remember? Yes. So when we're following up dating, and now we have a purpose, but to pursue the purpose, it's hard for us or for some people to continue because of the baggage that we have from our past life. And after that, we see, okay, now we leave our baggage, start continuing our relationship, but then our understanding of physical interactions has to be cleaned, has to be in a right mindset. So we try to define and understand what sex means. I had a lot of comments after that class, personal comments, and people have a different opinion of what they used to think about sex, which is, thankfully, thanks to the Lord, it is in a good way. Now they try to take things seriously, even in relationship, about interactions, physical intimacy. So I hope that helped. But for today, now we addressed of the temptation of physical interaction. We're good, we're in a relationship, we're pursuing the godly dating. But sometimes, not sometimes, most of the times actually, there becomes conflict. So how are we going to deal with that? That's one of the topics. So just throughout the weeks, as you guys see it, we're kind of wrapping up. We're going to have 2 more classes finishing this. So we're trying to go to the end of relationship, pursuing and continuing to the idea of godly marriage. And that's supposed to be the end of the goal of dating. Obviously, we defined that in the first week. Today's objective is going to be understanding what unhealthy arguments comes from. Arguments are okay. And we'll see why it's okay. But unhealthy arguments, where do they come from in a relationship? That's the objective. The second one is to learn ways of changing expectations instead of just giving up. How are we going to do? Should we give up or change our expectations? And that attitude would drastically, in a good way, change our relationship. And finally, we learn some methods of resolving conflict. That's our goal for today. In relationship, it's inevitable. And people that are in long relationships, in a marriage and everything, they would attest that always there is a conflict, there is an argument. Especially when we strive to have a godly relationship. When we strive to have like a righteous relationship, definitely there's going to be conflict. There are going to be temptations. And usually the reason might be our comfort, because we're dealing with our comfort. It could be fleshly comfort, it could be mind or our thought comfort, not to deal with things. But when we're comfortable and pursuing godly relationship, which means God is in that relationship, there is a conflict. There's one story in Mark chapter 4, verse 36. It's really eye-opening. And the story, it's called, we can call it the story of the storm. In Mark chapter 4, as usual, Christ would do different miracles, help people, the poor, the sick, and everything. But at one point, he would stay away or get away from the crowd and stay within a boat with the disciples. And while he was in the boat, there would be a huge storm. If you just superficially just read the story, you wouldn't see the deeper meaning what I'm going to tell you, because it says, all right, there's a storm. They would freak out and they would go, and Christ was sleeping, because he's also human and God. So he's sleeping, and then they would wake him up, and why are you just hanging out? Because we're struggling, save us. And then he would save them. But the story starts in a different way. So that's why it's very important when you read the Bible, every word matters. The story starts, they're at sea, and it says, there were other boats. There were other boats. But then the story completely changes, and it says, the boat that Christ is in, there was a storm. There was a storm. So our forefathers defined this in a sense that in relationship, in spiritual life, and everything, you might see other people thinking they're living the best of their life. They're okay in everything in the worldly life. But my life is in turmoil. And Christ, the boat where Christ is in there, that was where the storm was. It says there were other boats around the sea, but where Christ is in, the storm came. And Christ would get up and then quiet the storm. So whenever Christ is in your relationship, whenever you're trying to pursue good, godly relationship, but in some way you're comfortable. So Christ is telling us, by the way, Christ, what he did in this world. Yes, there are deeper other reasons, theological and everything, but one of the reasons is to be a teacher for us. To be an example, right? He doesn't, this season, the Lent season, we fast. Christ doesn't have to fast. But he was showing examples. He doesn't have to get baptized. He's the one who gives baptism for others. But he was showing examples of what we should do. So he was in the other way, he was telling us that if you're comfortable and just, sleeping and not vigilant in your relationship life, in your dating life, even in spiritual life, there might be a storm. And you have to be ready for that. Our main point for today is conflict in relationship is inevitable, but mostly solvable. Mostly solvable. It's inevitable. Why is it inevitable? Because this is very important. Follow me here. We need to understand that in a relationship or in dating, there are two people striving to become one. There are two people striving to become one. It's very important. There are two people. They're trying to become one person. Right? In the marriage idea, two people become one. We define that. Now, when we say two people become one, we're not saying this person is going to become this person and then become one, or this person is going to become this person and become one. There's a difference in that. I can't give up my past, my ambition, my interest, my behavior, and to become just like my wife, to be one person. And my wife is the same way. She can't leave everything that she lived with, her experience and everything, and just be to be like me. And in some relationship, that's one of the problems. We try to give up everything that we have, our past, our intention and everything, just to satisfy the other person and become like the other person. But deep down, we're different. So that kind of creates eventually conflict. But when we're saying to people become one, the idea is this person, for example, me, I have to strive to become one. If I have to compromise, I will compromise. If she would have to compromise, she would compromise. And in the middle, we become one person who have compromised interest, compromised thinking, and in that sense, we become one person, which is a different person. Does it make sense? We can't become one person, whoever I have interest in everything, I can't leave everything of what I have and just to be the other person. If there is no interest of striving to become one person, by living, it might be compromising and everything, but to become a different person, then there's always a conflict. All of us has pasts. Every one of us, we learn from our past. There are some scars from the past that maybe we're dealing with. We'll see it later on, but all of us have different pasts. And that apparently would also makes us different than the other person. And that's okay. And that's okay. And that's the first thing you need to understand. When we are in a relationship, yes, I am a different person. She's a different person, but we're making the middle, we'll find the middle ground to become one. Dating time is where you will know, that's why the dating is, we pursue, is where you know the majority of the other person's interests, past, characters, behaviors, all of those things. And the other person, same way, he will learn about you. That's the goal of the dating time. But then at the end, we'll become a new person. Now, if you forget if you're not following everything that we learned in the past 4 or 5 weeks, for example, if your purpose is completely different, if you're only focusing the outside appearance, if you still have your baggage, and if you have a different definition of sexual relation, all of those things, there is always a conflict. So understanding that leads, all the things what we learn, it leads you to have a better relationship in communication and everything, but again, it's inevitable. There will be conflict because you two are different persons. Now, when the conflict rises in a relationship, our theme verse is this: in your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. Do not give the devil a foothold. It's in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26. It's very important. Do not, in your anger, do not sin. What does it mean? In your anger, do not sin. So it's telling you that anger and sin is completely different in this sense. He's in a way insinuating that, yes, because of our nature, because of our corrupt nature, fall of Adam, corrupt nature, yeah, we get angry. It's natural to get angry. It's natural. But how you deal with that anger is what determines if you're committing a sin or if you're not committing a sin. It's because of anger that you might have resentment. Now, the resentment will become sin. Because of anger, you would hold a grudge. You're not going to have an unforgiving heart. You're not going to have a forgiving heart. All of those things are eventually sin. But being angry is a nature. That's why St. Paul knows they say, yes, you might get angry, but in your anger, do not commit sin. And then, how you're not going to commit sin because of anger, he explains it a little briefly. He says, do not let the sun down. Some people just literally take this idea, do not set the sun down, so just wait, the sun is not down, so let's, no. Do not let the sun down has a deeper meaning. If you're sitting in the midday or let's say 3 p.m. or something, so let the sun down, it takes time. Even like when you're seeing the sun, right? Like people, especially in daytime, we would go and see the sunset and all those things, right? The sun doesn't set in like 2 seconds, right? It takes time. It takes time. It takes time to set. So he was saying that in your anger, do not have a second thought, do not make it dwell in your heart until to have a different thinking about that person. So find a way to channel out your anger. But if you have that anger and then just sit down and contemplate about it, contemplate it again and again and again and again, now you give a foothold for the devil. Now you will say, okay, she did this because of maybe she had another person in her life. He did this because he resents you. He doesn't like your appearance. And now the devil start playing in our mind. So it's not about the day and the night. It's not about like if I'm angry, let me wait until whatever moment. It means deep down, don't make it dwell in your heart. Find a way to channel it. Find a way to address it. That's why it says, do not let the sun down. Some of you, if you read the Bible, it kind of looks like a little bit contradict of what Christ says in Matthew chapter 5. He says, whoever becomes angry at his brother, he deserves punishment. Whoever is angry at his brother. Now it kind of looks, contradicts. But there are 2 things. The first thing that Christ was saying there is not just getting angry because that's our nature, but our thought of to do something because of our anger. And we all know these things if you search deep down. When we're angry, we want to punch or to do something or imagine doing something in our mind. That is actually committing a sin. That's what Christ said. The second thing, the very important thing is all in Matthew chapter 5, Christ's commandment is setting rule, setting the bar. I can give you an example. For example, when you drive in a highway or in any road, if there is a construction, what do? They will have a cone, right? And then they block the road. In what proximity do they block the road? Is it like, for example, if there is a construction here, are they going to sit right here? They will have an extended place and then they will put it there. Why? In case if a person comes in, now there is a space also to protect wherever the construction and things like that. It's setting the bar very far, or in our sense, very high. So Christ's commandments for us is setting the bar high, because now we strive to reach to that. Now every time we strive to reach to that, instead of, oh, I'm looking at the girl and it's okay, instead of that, I'll strive not to look at the girl in a lustful way. Trying our best. So that's what the law or Christ's commandment sets in the high bar for us, to strive to achieve that, because the achievement is Christ. Christ is his nature. He wants us to be like him. That's where the bar is. So it doesn't contradict. But yes, fleshly, because flesh we get angry, but at the same time we have to strive to not commit a sin. So where does our arguments come from in a relationship? Where does it come from? St. James, the Apostle James, gives us a very good definition for that. It says, what causes fights and quarrel among you? What causes it? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? Is it not because of the desire or the flaws that battles inside of you? Is it not because of that? He was giving us like an answer, a rhetorical answer. Yeah, so mostly arguments come from our own battles, our own flaws, mostly. but in the heated moment of argument, we're blindsided. We don't see those. Mostly comes from our own battles. What are those battles in our life? The first and the foremost of conflicts that leads to, breakup and all of those things is the first and foremost is it comes from our ego. It's because of our ego. What does ego means? We try to define it for this class. It means that we want always to be right. Always we want to be right. And I really relate with that. Me and my wife, she's not here today, so I can talk about that. But, so, I have a tendency that I want to be right, even though there is something that I'm not right, I don't take it. I deny that I'm still right. And hers is she always wants to wait things happen and she says, okay. And she's so eager to say what? I told you so. That's in most of our relationships. We want it to be right. And let's say the other person says, no, it's this way, and we just wait. If you are that person who says, I told you so, if you are that person, which means you want more to show that you're right more than solving the problem. Or more than the feeling of the other person. Godly relationship, righteous person, striving to be Christ. Yes, his ideas are not taken in whatever relationship, and it's wrong, but then that person, okay, I am right, but now my significant other is felt bad. And I'll comfort him, or I'll comfort her. I know I'm right. That kind of attitude is what needs for us. But because of our ego, we want to show that we are right. Again, James says about this, he says, for where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and evil in everything. There is disorder. When there is that ego, that just I'm right, whatever I say is right, and because of my ego, that's where always there is evil, discord, argument. And the other way to look at ego is that we always want to win. Even if it's right or wrong, we want to win. We want to win. We want to win arguments. Sometimes we actually come up with arguments so that we're going to win. There are people like that. Just for the sake of just in a discussion, they just come up, think of an idea to create an argument that they know the answer of it, that they are right, just for the sake of, winning the argument. And we get so mad when we lose an argument. We get so mad. Why? Because of that ego. And there is a verse, behold, as for the proud one, his soul is not right within him, because the righteous will live by his face. But the righteous will live by his face. Behold, as for the proud one, his soul is not on the right place. If you're too proud of admitting that you're wrong, if you're too proud of creating a safe environment for communication and to deal things, a proud one. Your heart is not in the right place. That verse is in Habakkuk. It's a prophecy. You can write that. There's Habakuk. Habakkuk. It's the name of a prophet. Chapter 2, verse 4. It says, behold, as for the proud one, his soul is not right within him. That's where anger came from. That's where arguments come from. The first thing, because of our ego. The second most important thing is because we don't understand. We don't understand. We don't understand why that argument is coming from, is raised at that moment. We don't know. We don't understand how to deal with that argument. And then that really creates the conflict. And it raises your conflict. Because we don't understand. what are we not understanding? The first thing is not understanding our significant other's past. That's why in the dating time, this needs to be raised. If people are, suffering because of backs or like in the past, if there's trauma or something, it needs to be raised. It's because of there is insecurity or something, fear. All of these things needs to be raised so that the other person would appropriately communicate with the other person. Not understanding means, one of the examples is sometimes, especially, I'll pick the girls and the guys, so I'm trying to be fair. But for the guys, in a conflict, in a discussion, in an argument, sometimes we don't understand why we're arguing in the first place. Right? Like there's something, the argument come up and like, why are we arguing? Like there's nothing there to be argued. It's a wrong mentality. And I give you that, you are 100% right that there's nothing to argue even in that, something that happened in that moment. You have to look beyond that. Yeah, at that moment, maybe there's nothing. You could probably, a person is wearing a slippers and that makes you annoyed or something, and then the person gets mad. But that wasn't the reason. The reason might be something from a backstory. The reason might be something that happened right before. The reason might be completely different. So even, again, I just pick on the guys, but even from the girls, in a relationship, you have to look beyond that actual incident. You have to understand what creates that argument, that conflict. And looking beyond that conflict is really helpful to solve it. Otherwise, you're immersed in that thing, in that argument at that moment. You say like, "There's nothing there. I don't understand why we're fighting. There's no fight." Now you're getting angry. Yes, that person might get angry, but that, for the most part, that situation is not what that makes the person angry. There must be something behind that. So try to understand that. Try to look beyond the conflict at that moment. And the second thing, not understanding what makes conflict, is not understanding our genetic behavior, our biological behavior. Personally, in my life, I kind of recently find out, I think, past year or 2 years. So maybe a lot of people relate with me. So when I get hungry, I get mad. And I don't know why. In talk, like my wife said, like, why are you angry? I don't know, because later on I figured out it's because when I'm angry, the frustration, the way that I project it is just I'm angry. And we found out this, and we went to a marriage retreat conference, and the teacher was talking about it. It's like, oh, I relate with that. I think that's why sometimes I get angry. So now the way that we deal is, for no reason, if I get angry, she's like, did you eat your breakfast or lunch or dinner? And it's true. For example, our sisters, or the ladies, and maybe in the monthly cycle, they get frustrated. The majority. And in a relationship, you have to understand that. You truly have to understand that. And it doesn't have to have any reason. It doesn't have to be any situation. Because especially as a guys, we don't understand it. The way that they're struggling. At that moment. So at that time, if they're angry or frustrated, for our side, there's nothing there. There's nothing happened. I didn't do anything wrong. But understanding. An argument or reasoning may sometimes, if there is nothing to argue about, and let's say there is an argument, for guys sometimes that might sound foolish. Why are we arguing? It's nonsense, right? But you know who's our idea, our role model for conflict resolution? It's God. Right? Man and God were in a conflict. Man committed a sin. Man left the promise of what God gave us. Man committed a sin. Everything is on the man. But God came down to resolve that conflict. And it says here, I think I didn't put it here, it's 1 Corinthians chapter 3, there is a very nice verse that says, God chose man's foolishness to give salvation to mankind. God, the heavenly God, becoming man, for the philosophers and everyone, it's foolish. It's not going to happen. But God used that foolish to resolve a conflict. So sometimes if something is not, it's foolish, it might be foolish, but then we have to use that foolishness to understand the person to resolve a conflict. You may have a point, but that doesn't matter. If you're still focusing on proving yourself that you're right, now the ego kicks in. That means that you're egotistic. You're not saying to, or you're not trying to solve the problem, but just wanting to prove you're right. In Proverbs, it says, a fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. And the way of understanding, earlier I mentioned about the genetic, like biological behaviors and all of those things, but also of communication. I gave last time one person a book. I really recommend most of you to get that book. It's called The 5 Love Languages. It really helps you to understand the people of how to communicate with them. In that book, the idea is the language of the other person. If the other person wants to be affirmed, to encourage, that's their language. You have to use that to increase their love, confidence. And if the other person if it is a gift, if it is affectionate, if it is quality time, it gives you different methods. And also the book, it gives you to measure who you are, in what kind of language, love language that you communicate. So that helps you to understand the other person. So that's the second thing. The second thing is not understanding. Sometimes if we don't understand what is happening, we get frustration and all those. In this, I think, I thought I put it, but maybe I'll mention it later. One of the other things that you have to understand is, now for this idea for the guys, sometimes it doesn't have to be solving a problem. Again, in my relationship, I used to think that my wife comes frustrated about something, and my mind is really wired at that moment. Okay, there is a problem. I need to solve that problem for her, so that they can be happy and relieve and everything. Just the problem. Solving the problem. But I start trying that more and more, it actually escalated the relationship. Why? Because my mind is wired just to solve a problem. So you need to be careful to understand that in that situation, in most of that kind of situation, maybe it's not about the problem, it's not about solving the problem, it's just a comfort or emotional support. Emotional support, especially the guys, because this really helps you in a relationship. If your significant other is frustrated in work and comes home and talk about, like, I'm so frustrated, this happened, I didn't get the promotion and everything, the answer should be, or you should apply to other job, or you should do this thing. If you're saying that, you're escalating it. It's not about the solution. It's about comfort. It's about giving an emotional support. How does that make you feel? I feel for you. It's okay. And comfort. Because sometimes, yes, we are wired to solve the problems, but obviously we know that our sisters, they know mostly, other than us, how to solve the problem. They know that. But what we need to do as a guy is just to give comfort. So understanding these different behaviors of relationships really helps to resolve the conflict. Third, what raises anger and conflict, unhealthy conflict or argument, is unconfessed sin. an unconfessed sin. If there is a sin in your life that you're not confessed, when we say sin, we're not just committing the do's and the don'ts. I'm not only saying that. Anything that is a burden in your heart, if you are not confessed. I can give you an example. If, let's say, in a relationship, the woman's family is kind of irritating the guy. Again and again and again and again. Unless addressing that with the girl, and unless addressing that, even if it's more than that, with the confession father, and in that sense, if you completely hold it like for a long time, that's an unconfessed flaw. It's an unconfessed sin. That's a baggage. If that continues, that's what creates a conflict. Now, there is a very easy, like slight things that went wrong. Now we come up and say, go behind, like, oh, the last 5 years actually this happened, and then we start talking about that because we didn't communicate, we didn't confess. And we'll say, hey, I know this happened, but and you remember what you did 2 months ago? And then we'll start talking about that because we're holding that. There was this actual person when I used to work before. He's a colleague, and he's in, I think in his 50s or something. So he's divorced, and so I was like, why did you guys divorce? And he was telling me that the relationship or the communication was really bad. And he was telling me that he's an engineer. He's good in math. So every time there is whatever that she did wrong, he used to calculate it. And he will hold like the date, when it happened, the month, and everything. He will hold that. And it will continue, and at the end, and like whenever that it bursts into conflict, or remember this date and this time, this moment, what happened? That's not a healthy relationship. It needs to be confessed. It needs to be confessed with your significant other, with no one else. And I think we need to address this one in the next weeks. In your relationship, in conflicts, you need to address the things with your significant other only. Only. Don't involve the parents. Don't involve your sister-in-law, and all of those things. Only with your significant other. But let's say if it is a little more than that, in the church. With your confession father. That's it. So if you tallying it and holding it again and again, then that's an unconfessed sin. Something that we don't, that's how we pile it up, so that now we have an excuse, even if we have to do something wrong. The fourth one. So this is very important. I know I put it around the last, but this is very important. What brings more conflict and anger is lack of communication skills. Lack of communication skills. In Proverbs, Solomon mentioned, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And it's true. It's true. There might be a conflict. The way that you address it matters. The place that you address it matters. The timing matters. The tone matters. So, those tips for the communication I put is, I would say, just for you guys to understand, the 2 A's and the 3 T's. The 2 A's is the first one, avoiding assumption. And the second one, avoiding absolute. Avoiding assumption and avoiding absolute. What do we mean by avoiding assumption? This is like, I'm a champion for that. I always assume. And maybe people relate with this. So in the discussion, so I have a different, like I said earlier, the way that the upbringing, all of us has a different. For me, 2 things. The first thing is that upbringing in our household, nobody speaks in a sense like anger or something. Everything is quiet. I remember one time my wife come at home and someone said something and she's like, oh, something's about to happen. But there's nothing. I'm quiet. It's like, they just leave. And we internalize it and they would just leave. It's like, everyone's quiet. My wife's side is completely different. Everyone shouts, everyone says whatever that they feel, and I was like, I was so shocked when I was there. Like, people say stuff and it's not hurt, but people are okay. If the other person says stuff, and they're okay. Now there's two different upbringing. Now we came together. So in her experience, that's how she expresses her feelings. For mine, it's everything quiet. So it starts like things that she says start like hurting me. And me not saying stuff to her start hurting her because she wants me to express my feelings. Our upbringing is completely different and that bothers us. And one of my upbringing is, like I said, we just say a few words. As soon as she tries to explain herself in one or two words, I kind of generalize it and say, I got it. I don't wait until she continues and finishes. I get it. And then I'll do things. And sometimes she said, that's not what I said. I always take things like very briefly, and then understand it and just leave. And I assume. I generalize and assume, which was wrong. So when you communicate your concerns, first get your date's perspective point of view. You have to know what she was saying. And that an easy tip to give you is sometimes because I have that habit of like, okay, I got it, and okay, I got it. Instead of that, try to reiterate or rephrase whatever that she was talking to me. Do that really helps. Okay, you meant to say such and such. Then now I'm trying to understand what she was saying. Instead of just assuming and then continue. Even in a relationship, in a discussion, that really hurts. It creates a conflict because now I'm assuming something, and based on my assumption, my action is different, but my action is supposed to be different because what the other person is saying a different way. So if you don't get it, repeat it, that you understand what the other person is saying, that really helps. The other one is avoiding absolute. And again, I struggled so much on this one. And especially in the heated moment. In the heated moment, try to avoid those absolute words. Don't say every time, all the time, always. This affects the relationship. You're always this angry. You're always this. If you're saying that, that means that person takes it like she's always like that or he is always like that. But you're saying that because of that conflict, not that he or she is always in the wrong path. But because we are so heated in the moment, we use those words. And that hurts people. So try to avoid using, you are always like this. Every time this happens because of everything. Don't use those words. Instead of saying that, this happens right now, and then this happens today, so that's wrong. Addressing it that way. Just address what you feel at those moments, at that moment. So the two absolute, not being absolute, not taking assumptions. That really solves a conflict between communication. The third one is I call it the 3 T's. I think I found it somewhere, or I don't remember, but it's really helpful. Text, time, and then tone. Remember earlier I mentioned mine is, I think I'm sensitive of when she talks, my wife talks, like I feel like, oh, that hurts me. And the words hurts. So what we decided later on is, if there is an argument, it's a really heated argument, we'll take a little time for ourselves. I might go somewhere else, she will go somewhere else, but then in that moment, text each other. The usefulness of that is now you have the time to choose words. But where you're up resting and then saying things, you're not selecting words. So when you text, I wanted to say this, but then, like there's actually a promotion for that, like you wanted to say something, but then you delete it and then say something. So same thing, now you wanted to say this, but that's not the right word, you delete it, and then you convey the message that you wanted to convey. So it really helps. It gives you time to choose your words wisely and not to say impulsive and hardened words. Second is time. 2 ideas for the time. First is the time when you say it. Whenever that there's an important text that you want to convey, you have to choose the time. In the heated moment, don't say things. Sometimes I would actually advise that it's a very heated argument, taking time. Taking your time yourself. Just think about it, contemplate about it, and then when you calm down, create a conversation. And however it sounds so uncomfortable, that's the way that you need to, convey your message. So taking time. And for example, let's say if I'm doing something wrong and I want my wife to say that to me in front of maybe like in my colleagues or in this kind of situation, in this platform, right? It has to be separated in the house or something. So time, when we say time, the place where to say it really matters. The third is the tone. The tone, how you're going to say things. You might be right, you wanted to address things in the right way, but the tone matters. If you're saying it in the judgmental tone, if you're saying it in the sarcastic tone, all of those things is not going to solve the problem. So the tone that you wanted to say, even like you wanted to say that, just take time a little bit, take a breath, and then try to rephrase it if you have even to say it in a different tone. Again, Solomon says this, the heart of the righteous weighs its answers, but the mouth of the wicked gushes it up. This is pretty straightforward. The heart of a righteous person weighs its answers. It weighs it, what he has to say or what she has to say. But a wicked person just gushes and just say things. It might be hurtful. So using text or using different methods of not saying it, that really helps. Time and tone really helps. The other idea of communication is changing expectation versus giving up. Changing expectation. And I think the first class I mentioned this one. Now, for our sisters, again, this is not to be offensive, but I'm expressing my experiences right here. So, there's always that try to change a person. I wanted to change that person. I wanted to change him. And even from the guy, sometimes I wanted to change her. And you have to understand, there is a story there in Apollo and Paul. It's in 1 Corinthians. The story goes that people divided between two of the followers of Christ. One is St. Paul, the other is called Apollo, which is St. Paul's friend. So people start following, saying that, oh, I'm a follower of Apollo. And some of them will say, oh, I'm a follower of St. Paul. And eventually St. Paul heard about that. And he was so infuriated. He was so angry. Anger, their nature. But then he addressed that to them. They say, why are you thinking like that? Did St. Paul die for you? Or Apollo received beating for you? No. Christ is the one who died for you. So why are you fighting, saying I'm a Paul follower or I'm a St. Paul follower? That's wrong. And he was mentioning that we were actually servants of Christ. So you have to know what our purpose or what our responsibility was. And St. Paul says, my responsibility was to plant the seed in the people's heart. And the responsibility of Apollo was to water that seed. See, he gave him an example of, nature. If you plant the seed, if you water the seed, really think about it. You think that you're growing that plant, but you're not. And St. Paul mentioned that. I was planting and Apollo was watering. But who was growing that plant was the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit. So, my idea in here is if there is things, habits, opinions, things that you want your significant other to change, it's not your responsibility to change a person. Also, there is one other story that I actually experienced when I was back home in Ethiopia. We went to this monastery. I don't know, some of you might went over there. It's called Dagmai Golgotha. And the place is kind of a monastery there, and there is a huge cave that one person did. One monk created all that monastery by himself. Carving all the cells, the cave and everything. And through the rock, making like the Beit HaMikdash, which is the church within the cave, by himself. And we were like, this is so amazing. Why did you do this? I know you're like affluent teacher. I know you can do other things. Why did you stick with carving the rock, hitting the rock, all those years to create this? You know what his answer was? It's amazing. It sticks to my heart until now. He says, you guys don't understand. It's easier to carve a rock than to change a person's heart. Sometimes we toil and we strive, we say I want to change this person, and we nag, we do all those things, we give this different methods to change a person. You can't change a person. God is the only one who changes people. God is the only one who changes people's heart. So, as a spiritual, since we're in a spiritual teaching, coming back to God, and praying and getting His wisdom, how to deal with that situation, that's where God changed. It either changed the other person or changed you. But He can't change. So that's why I'm saying, in that situation, through prayer, through spiritual guidance, either God, in His divine wisdom, He will change the other person or change your expectation. Change your expectation. So you need to clear that out, because most of the conflict starts by trying to change a person. We usually expect our significant other to change. We shouldn't give up, but change our methods and our expectations. And that our methods is coming back to God and praying, and truly from your heart. And I'll attest to that. I was so, how do I say it? I was so against stuff even in this teaching in English, in 6-7 years ago. I was so against this. I was in a way I was like a hermit person, because that's my understanding of spirituality is that. And I was always having an argument with my wife, and Diakon David is here, he could attest to that. We always argue, saying, no, this has to be this way, and this has to be this way, and all of those things. Nobody changed me. But again, I attest that, and my wife can attest that too, is we start praying. She started praying more than me, so that to see the bigger picture of things, to see the bigger picture of how we can save people, not even Ethiopian descendants, but others. Because I know how my heart was so stubborn at that time. So you can change a person through prayer, or God will give you to change your expectation and your heart. So that's one of the things. The other thing is in a relationship conflict, express only your feeling. Use your in a way I phrase. I felt in this way. This made me feel in this way. Instead of you did this. Instead of anything the way that you express shouldn't be forced toward the other person. It has to be always how you feel or what that makes you feel. That kind of alleviates your conflict in the relationship. Having said that, conflicts are inevitable in a relationship. But I hope you should use these methods, especially with the divine wisdom of God. That helps you. But if you're going through with the godly relationship that we studied and find a person and everything, this really helps. But if you're not pursuing that relationship, yes, you can change your life. Not through confessing, through coming to God, you can change your life. But if you're still in that life and wants to make your life godly, it's not going to work. And remember earlier we mentioned in the boat, yes, you might see the other boats without the turmoil, but in the God's eye, those are the ones who are actually in the turmoil, not the one that's God is in the relationship. So sometimes because it gets carried, we get carried away of seeing other people and they are not followers of Christ and their life is okay. Their relationship is okay. But me, I'm following Christ, but I'm always struggling to find somebody. And when I found somebody and all those things, if you're in the righteous way of dating relationship, again, follow Christ, pray. Either He will give you someone or He makes your heart, remember last week He says, makes your heart give similar satisfaction of even for that time sense of being alone. So while we're teaching about this dating class, we're not saying people have to date to be happy. That's not the sense. Obviously, you would get that. But God has to be in every way of our life. It could be our dating, our spiritual, our me time, life, every time. God has to be within it. And I pray that God helps us in our relationship to resolve conflicts in a healthy way. Glory to be God. Yeah.